You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. Set palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. How are you all doing today? Anyone here for the first time? Now that I put you on the spot, what brings you here?
Drinks too much.
Say again?
Drinks too much.
You drank too much. Yes. Well, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else?
Recovery.
Recovery from?
Drugs.
How's that working out for you?
It's going pretty well.
Good. One day at a time, right?
Thank you.
For sure. What else? First time here.
Recovery.
Rob? It's interesting because, I've worked in the recovery environment for over 25 years, truly. And I'm not in recovery. Never have been. And also not an addict, which would explain why I'm in recovery. And what's fascinating is the parallels in the world of recovery, trying to free yourself from the addiction, the craving, the desire, the drugs, the alcohol, all these things that tend to take our lives in directions that we probably shouldn't go into. And the reason I ask the question of recovery from what, the answer is always the same. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, sex, whatever it might be, somebody comes out with something that they're addicted to. But when you look at it from a Buddhist practice, a Buddhist lens, for me, the most important thing to understand is that what we're really trying to recover from is our sense of self, our ego, our pride, our shame, our guilt, our blame. I mean, and on. It's only an hour that we're together tonight, so I'll stop the list there. But we always jump directly to the thing that we use or take or consume. But Buddhist practice is really just holding up a mirror. And when you hold up a mirror, what do you see?
Glory.
Say again?
Glory.
Glory? Well, that's good. That's very positive. We don't usually get too many positive people around here, you know? So I appreciate the positive response. You get glory. I've definitely never heard that before. What else would we potentially see when we look in a mirror? Although I think that's kind of the best answer, so let's go with that. I take back my question. You see glory, right? Well, that's great. What we see is whatever is reflected in that mirror. And that could mean different things to different people. And if we see glory when we look into a mirror, that's beautiful. If we see sadness, hatred, anger, shame, disappointment, disgust, that leads to everything else. So it's really important to recognize that when you begin to learn about Buddhist teachings and Buddhist practice, he was just some dude who lived 2,500 years ago and wanted people to understand, what's that reflection in the mirror? And how can you get to know that reflection in the mirror? Because that's really critical. And whether, you have an addiction or not, I often say, and again, I don't mean any offense by this, especially, working with folks for a long time, heroin addicts, you show up one day, they're there, you show up to treatment next day and they're gone. And gone meaning they're not coming back. So I don't take any of this lightly. I take it very seriously. But I often say, in somewhat of a joking way, that we're all in recovery for something or from something, right? Whether it's a drug, alcohol, whatever it might be, or just life. And when we can begin to look at ourselves and see, you say glory, see the beauty that's there. In Buddhism, we call this bodhicitta. I talked about this on Saturday. But bodhicitta is Buddha nature, which means we are all already beautiful, awakened human beings. But can we see that? Can we recognize that? And can we live with that? Because that perception of ourselves is often very far from how we feel all day long. Right? For me, my addiction was really just, even though I know I said I didn't have an addiction, but my addiction was I was just addicted to being an angry, pissed off, mean person. That's who I was and how I was. So when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't seeing any glory. I was seeing anger and hatred and rage. That's what I saw when I looked in the mirror. And that was something that I had to work through. And so the meditation practice, which we'll start here in a minute, and beginning to learn, what did the Buddha actually teach of how to live a kind, gentle, simple, peaceful, compassionate life, that begins to change the way you see yourself. And if you can change the way you see yourself, you'll change the way you act. And if you change the way you act, your entire world will change. Anyone in here hurt anyone around them ever? Right? Anyone in here want to spend the rest of their life hurting people? Nobody does. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. Some people do. But in most cases, we don't want to hurt people because we know what it's like to be hurt. So when you can see that bodhicitta, that Buddha nature, that beautiful essence that we all are, we change. So, sounds nice, right? I wish it was like that simple. So, but again, that's why we call it practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome. I just wanted to give a little bit of a message here. I know Laverne, there's a really beautiful group from Buddhist Temple San Diego that's here. They have like a scout program, for lack of better words. Sorry for not explaining it perfectly, but they have to observe different like religious experiences in temples and things like that. And so a few years ago, they would bring the students, I think they're teenagers, they would bring them here, but with pandemic and things being a little more cautious, they've chosen to just stay online tonight. So, but hi Laverne and to everybody else that's there. 5 of us from the Buddhist Temple of San Diego are joining you this evening. Ken, Cassidy, Lorena, Andrea, and myself. Well, nice to see you. I'll do my best to not ruin your life forever. So thanks for being here and the rest of our millions of followers. So we'll do a meditation practice to begin. A couple things I'll tell you before we sit. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice when you don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture. You just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Same thing if you're on a bench or a chair, however you're seated. Stomach forward slightly, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. Just means your leg hurts. And for those who are brand new, you're not trying to stop your thoughts or empty your mind or think nothing. Your mind is going to continue to race, as it always does. I will say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep, or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives, but with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. Most of you won't even make it out of this room before you're disturbed. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. It's not closing your eyes and pretending you're sailing down a river and looking at all the birds and trees and flowers and thinking life is grand. Life is filled with absolute chaos. This practice is learning to be with the chaos as it arises and to not run and escape. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Meditation is not a business. Buddhist practice is not a business. It's a way of life. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and every single person you encounter every moment of your life. It's becoming aware of what we think, what we say, and what we do. And this is what the Buddha called karma, our actions. Everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do has an impact in the world around us. And that's why this practice is so difficult, because it's putting the responsibility for your own peace of mind, your own happiness, your own joyful life on your shoulders. No one else's. No one else is responsible for your happiness. No one else is responsible for your misery. And that in itself is incredibly liberating. Too often people spend their whole lives looking for that person or place or thing that brings them a sense of peace and happiness. And once you stop looking and you just sit and you breathe, you realize what you've probably been chasing your entire life is already there. And once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets a little bit simpler. But it requires us to stop trying to force everything and to just sit and allow ourselves to be. So with that, I'll pause. As always, I really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with, and we use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll respond to what's on your mind. And again, welcome everybody to all of our virtual folks at home or wherever you are. There's a chat box, as you see, somewhere on your screen. So feel free if you have any questions. Linda, Brian, good to see you. You're well. Benton, glad you could make it. Amy, if you have any questions, thoughts, same thing. Laverne, any of the crew from the temple there, if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat box here and I'll do my best to respond. So questions?
You mentioned earlier how if you change the way you view yourself, you can change the way you act. But for someone who hasn't been doing a lot better showing compassion to other people, but I've been having a bit of a hard time showing compassion to myself. So how would you go about changing the way you view yourself or just showing yourself compassion in general?
Yeah, great question. And I think that was normally I repeat it for the virtual folks, but I think you're as close to the microphone as I am, so they probably heard it. But really your question is around self-compassion. And that as you're beginning to change your thoughts and starting, the first step to changing your thoughts is really what? Before we can change them, what do we have to do about them? Realize them, become aware of them. So that's, without even realizing it, you're doing that, right? You're stopping to recognize, wow, these are my thoughts. And when we recognize them, we begin to change them. When we begin to change our thoughts, we change our actions. And that, I'm kind of rephrasing your question, your thoughts here, but that sounds really great towards others, and that often works. But for whatever reason, we are the hardest on ourselves. We're the most critical of ourselves. We're most judgmental of ourselves. So there's about 1,000 different ways to respond to this question. But let me give you a couple things to think about. Do you know 10 people? If you ask 10 people to describe you, and maybe these are people that have known you at different stages of your life, would all 10 of them say the exact same thing? No. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? So what if you're the 11th person standing there and I ask you to describe yourself? Are you right? Are you wrong? Or is that just your perception? How long have you been telling yourself stories about yourself? About being a good person or a bad person, nice person or mean person, selfish person or generous person? How long have these stories been in your head about yourself? You could respond.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I was like, this isn't a trick question. How long? Their whole life. Okay. Now, isn't that fascinating that we've been telling ourselves stories our whole life? Now, for me, I can, and I try not to talk about too much like my personal stuff here. Not that this is that personal, but we all relate to things differently. But if I just flash back to me as the 15-year-old kid, all I told myself for many years leading up to being that 15-year-old kid was what a mean, angry, miserable person I was. And that was my story. And no matter how kind or gentle I might have been at 15 years old to a certain situation or person, the story I told myself was completely different. You know how long that story stuck in my head? A long time. And I still have to battle that story coming up again. But here's the thing about stories. They're not reality. I might have done certain things at certain points of my life, just like you. But that doesn't define who we are. So the first step of having what you really, does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
The first step of having what you're really talking about, which is self-compassion, compassion for yourself, is recognizing how to stop telling yourself the stories. Because if you didn't, and I'm just making stuff up here, but if you didn't tell yourself the story about what a miserable person you were, then maybe you wouldn't think you're a miserable person. It's really the same thing, that if you stop viewing other people certain ways, right? And you've asked questions about this in the past, but do you have anyone in your life that you have anger towards or resentment towards? And if you change your view to them, would that potentially change your behavior towards them? So it's the same thing to it yourself. But we're stubborn people. Are you stubborn? I mean, I'm stubborn. I shouldn't assume anyone else here is stubborn. So there's 2 stubborn people in this room right now. And no matter how often you might say to yourself, I'm actually, you're probably too young, but I remember Saturday Night Live, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Right? Stuart Smalley, and you might somebody in here old like me. All right, thank you very much. I'm not calling y'all old, but you're a lot better than you think you are. So the practice of meditation is learning to stay present. If you're present, what are you not doing? Thinking about what?
The past.
The past. All of our anger, our sadness, depression, it's in the past. Done. All of our stress, anxiety, fear, worry, future. Not here yet. So all meditation is learning to be, and this is the Zen practice, it's learning to just be in the present moment and experience life as it arises. And when you're in the present moment and you experience life as it arises, you're not wrapped up in all the stories about the past that lead you to anger and sadness and depression. And you're not wrapped up in the stories of the future that lead you to stress, anger, anxiety, fear, worry. You're just learning to be present. And in the present moment, you abandon the stories. Sounds simple, right? It's not. I mean, you kind of knew that, but it's a practice. Learning to love yourself, have compassion for yourself and others is truly a practice and takes time. I wish I could say by the end of November, you'll be good. But if you've told yourself those stories your whole life, those stories don't go away at the blink of an eye, but they could. So you just have to practice. Oh, I'm lost in a story, right? I'm telling myself what a terrible person I am. Next thing you know, 6 hours have gone by and you're still telling yourself that story. So let it happen for 60 minutes and then say, nope, I'm done, and you change the direction. Don't live in that story because that story is not reality. Yeah. So Joe said, just thank the person who sees glory in the mirror. I'm telling you, people are going to be talking about that forever. Other questions? Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk more about the present moment.
Yeah.
We don't always carry with us the past, present. Some of us are really present, but even in the present moment, I could do a really nice thing for someone, and in that present moment, I'm critiquing myself, saying, "What's your true motive behind doing that? Are you really this nice person, or are you just a people pleaser?
Right.
Are you trying?" So it's like that voice is still in the present moment.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, and that person is valid. I mean, it's objectively seeing the situation and trying to discern my intentions, if they have an interior motive.
For sure. And that's really, it's really difficult because a big part of this practice, as you said, is to discern what is your intention, right? So on one hand, and this is the beauty of Buddhist practice, it's so paradoxical. Like it's such a contradiction, right? I mean, everything with Buddhist teachings, I'll come back to this, but let me give this as an example. Everything in the Buddhist teachings, the first teaching is the Four Noble Truths. The Buddhist says life is suffering. That's the first thing. We all suffer. Doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means you're going to suffer a lot. Pain, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. We have death, we have loss, we have sandwiches made the wrong way. Many extremes of suffering. Why do we suffer is the second noble truth. Greed, anger, and ignorance. We always want more. We're angry at how things are, and we're ignoring the true nature of reality. How do we overcome greed, anger, ignorance? The 3 poisons we practice. Generosity, compassion, and wisdom. Generosity to overcome greed, compassion to overcome anger, and wisdom to overcome ignorance. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering, nirvana, liberation, a happy day. And the fourth is the Eightfold Path. And this is having the correct views, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. All of that's on Google for free. Okay, just stay on the first 2 pages. The reason I tell that very quickly, other than just always as an overview for new people, is The Heart Sutra, one of the most commonly recited Buddhist sutras around the world, right? 2,000 years old. You know what the Heart Sutra says? There is no suffering. There is no cause of suffering. There is no cessation of suffering, and there is no path. There is no wisdom or any attainment whatsoever. What is that all about? Like for 2,500 years, people have been saying these are the Four Noble Truths. And yet 2,000 years ago, this Heart Sutra comes out as a teaching that says, seemingly negates all of that. The reason I bring that up is because what you're asking about is your discernment of your intention. And this practice is absolutely 100% about being very aware. What is your intention, motivation? What is your agenda in every thought, word, and action? Super important to understand. Critical on this path. Now what I'm going to say to you is, stop trying to discern your intention. Have I clarified that for you? Good.
Yeah, I just accept it.
It's really difficult because at some point in time, I think it helps, in theory, to just. You ever seen the movie Being There? Anyone ever seen it? Being There? A couple of you. Phenomenal movie. There's your homework. Okay? It's a Peter Sellers, 70-something cult classic. 2 hours of a guy named Chauncey the Gardener who literally is in the present moment and does nothing but wonderful things for 2 hours without any discernment whatsoever. And it's incredible what life he ends up living. I don't want to ruin it for you, but
it's a book too.
It's a book too.
Yeah, Georgi Kaczynski.
There you go. Probably better than the movie, huh?
Oh, I don't know. Peter Sellers.
Yeah, So, take your pick. But the answer to your question lies in that movie or book, because it shows you it's possible. And when you stop critiquing, and I think that's the last thing I'll say is that I get it. We're going to do things, then we're going to ask ourselves, am I doing good things just because I want credit or I want to feel good? At some point in time, it helps to stop the critique. Just do good things. If you're going to do good things, do good things. If you're going to do bad things, do bad things. One of my favorite Zen expressions is when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep. Just do things. Stop trying to figure everything out. It'll drive you crazy in case you haven't figured that out already.
What was that movie called again?
A being, like B-E-I-N-G, there.
A Being There.
Not A, sorry, I added an A. Just
Being There?
being there, yeah. B-E-I-N-G, there. Yep. It's funny. Other questions? Yes, sorry.
On that note, do you see, I guess, any connection between Buddhism and the practice of manifesting?
So the question was, just to repeat for those joining virtually, do I see any connection between Buddhism and manifesting? Is that your question? This is I want to say dangerous question. It's not a dangerous question, but I think we want to be very careful here and cautious in first. Well, let me ask you this, because this will help my response. When you say manifesting, automatically I have a story in my head that goes, if I sit here and I dream of that red Ferrari showing up, is that red Ferrari just going to show up someday because I'm thinking about it? What is manifesting to you is my question.
I think obviously desire is a big part of it, but on a spiritual level, at least for me, like being a kinder person, being a better person, being a more well-rounded person.
Yeah, see, that's why I'm glad I asked, because I see what you just said. Everything after my question, I heard as completely different from what your question was, right? Which is great. What I'm saying is I don't see those things as manifesting. When I think of manifesting, I think of like kind of this new age spiritual term that says if I just dream and journal all day long about having a great job and a great relationship and a great, financial whatever, and manifest, I want to travel. If I just think that all day long and journal it all day long, that means it's going to show up. That's what I think in kind of a new age modern day when I hear people say manifesting. And that's definitely not Buddhist practice. But from your description of manifesting, it sounds very different. What do you think?
I think just, I'm curious about the aspect of that desire,
Sure.
and then that voice as well, like, what is this desire, why do I want this desire?
Yes. So that's really important to understand the last part of what you said, which is, why do I want this desire, right? So are you brand new to Buddhist teachings, like pretty new, or?
I've dabbled.
Okay. So the Buddha taught very clearly, for anybody who doesn't know, that the root cause of all suffering is what? Desire. You've read that, right? Yeah. So, well, that kind of sucks, because we desire happiness. We desire healthy relationships. We desire a good life. And then Buddha says, well, desire leads to suffering. So the problem with desire is not the desire itself, but what happens if we don't get the things that we desire? And then what happens if we get what we desire, and then we what? We lose it. That's where attachment comes in. Craving comes in that says, I desire this, I got it. Can I have gratitude for it? Can I appreciate it? And can I see what the Buddha called impermanence in everything? Meaning that no matter what we crave and desire, if we get it, it at some point will be gone from our life. Whether we want to agree with that or not isn't always easy to do. But everything we crave and desire and get, at some point, all conditioned phenomena come together for a period of time and cease to exist, including us. Now, to back up a minute, the Buddha said there are healthy desires, right? For example, this craving or desire to end suffering. If, for the most part, none of you would be here unless you were just absolutely bored and had nothing else to do on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, then come to a temple and sit and eat, right? We are here because we crave and desire to suffer less, to be happier, to be pleasant in our lives, to enjoy every day. There's nothing wrong with these desires. But at the heart of it is the last thing you said. What is the intention behind it? Is it to feed my ego, myself, to make me feel better? Or is it actually about doing things that are also for the benefit of others? Does that make sense? I think what threw me off was manifesting, because just the way I hear people use the word manifest, kind of a new age spiritual way, is very different. And very often we know, and this kind of comes back to the earlier question, when we crave and desire something, you ever craved and desired something that was really healthy?
Yeah.
And you know it typically? You ever craved and desired something that was really unhealthy?
Yeah.
That was easier for you to answer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that? That's not even where I was going, but why is it that it's easier for us to recognize unhealthy cravings and desires? It was almost like you were ashamed to say that, yes, I know healthy desires. Unhealthy, oh yeah, I definitely know those. So sorry?
I'm just gonna say that the instant gratification isn't bad.
Yes.
Like, I know I shouldn't do that, but if I have it, I'll instantly feel better.
Right, like if I eat 4 scoops of gelato, I'm gonna love it in 10 minutes. And then the next morning, my stomach's gonna be feeling miserable. But then we justify in our heads that those 10 minutes of eating the 4 scoops, I'm giving myself 2.5 minutes per scoop. We justify why it was worth it. And then we spend the next 6 months regretting it. So very often, not always, but very often we know, I guess is what I'm getting at. We know the intention behind it. The question is, can we actually be honest with ourselves? And that's part of why the word Sangha, at the beginning we take refuge in Sangha, which is community. And that's why it's important, I don't care if it's here or whatever, but that's why it's important when you surround yourself with people who are on some sort of spiritual journey, are on some sort of spiritual path, like I said, here or anywhere, then you kind of hold each other accountable, hold each other responsible. You call each other out. I'm like, yeah, no, that's, years ago I got in an argument with somebody. This is like 13 years ago. And, we were both Buddhist people. And this person said to me, something. And I said, that's just how I am. And this person's response was, well, then maybe you should change how you are. It was one of the greatest things anybody ever said to me. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'm the problem. That was hard to recognize because we can get very good at justifying things in our head and very good at justifying our desires and our cravings as to why we think we need them and why they're so important. So it's just good to explore. I don't know if that even answered your question, but
Yeah.
stuff to think about. Just a comment here from Laverne. Thank you, Jeff and DBT, for the nuggets of light. Stop trying to discern your attention, in quotes. Thank you to Sangha member reminding us to see glory in the mirror. I told you. With gratitude and Engasha. Thanks, Laverne. I'm glad you all could be here. And hopefully I'll see you soon. Any final thoughts or questions? I'll do one more before we wrap up. Yeah.
Could you talk more about like the self? No, is that too broad? So
You just saw an experience of the self for the last 60 minutes.
Okay.
Me sitting up here thinking I know what I'm talking about. There's no greater sense of self than that.
So I'm guessing what I'm hearing is that because I'm brand new to meditation and Buddhist practice.
Me too. Yeah.
But so I'm hearing selflessness, non-judgment, meditation, observation, is kind of a key to a more Zen or less disturbed kind of life. Because I think I like when you said the word disturbed, because I think that my disturbances are really endless kind of wanting, having various points of success or an abundance of something in my life, and then always reaching for more. And I think that that's kind of been my path of destruction, is maybe, so.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you adding to that. And, a couple things, and I'll kind of close with this thought just to try to clarify a little bit. A couple examples. One, and the reason I said that about no and, is there's a very clear teaching from the Buddha where he was just a dude. He wasn't some god. He wasn't some big bellied guy floating in the sky. He was a prince from India. He lived 500 years before Christ. He had all the wealth, all the riches, all the money, anything, women you could imagine. And at 29 years old, he left. He said, I can't live in a life with all of this when there's a world out there that's suffering. So he snuck out in the middle of the night, and this is the 30-second version of the life of the Buddha. And he roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. And at 35 years old, he sat down and he said, I'm not leaving he was sitting under a Bodhi tree. He said, I'm not leaving from under this tree until I figure out why we suffer. So the story is that he sat for 21 days and began to understand the nature of his mind. And he realized that we suffer because of our attachment to self, our craving, our desire, the Four Noble Truths I rambled off earlier, this ego. This is why we suffer. 5 guys came over. If you look up above the door there, the exit sign, there's a picture. It's called the first turning of the Dharma wheel. And so that's Siddhartha, where there's a mudra, but those 5 guys he was traveling with, they left him, they came back and they said, there's Siddhartha, let's go sit with him. They sat down and he taught the Four Noble Truths. And they said, wow, you've figured out the path to suffering and how to end suffering or suffer less. We will call you the Buddha, the awakened one. So he taught for 45 years and then he died at 80, right? And then Buddhism spread for 2,500 years. So one of his very clear teachings to one of his disciples early on was he said to Subhuti, go give a discourse on wisdom. Okay? And Subhuti sat down, said nothing. And the Buddha said, good job. Right? The start, you mentioned the word Zen. Do you know what the word Zen means? Nobody does. I shouldn't say nobody does, but it's the most misused. You gotta love this country for completely ruining everything, right? Zen, the word Zen literally means, Chinese it's Chan, comes from jhana, knowledge or gnosis. It means meditation, right? So apparently you can have like meditation cereal, meditation, whatever. Zen is just meditation. So when people say Zen meditation, they're actually saying meditation. But the way we use it in our culture is the same way you. It's like, I want to be more Zen. And we use it as like a peaceful thing. And that's fine. Buddhists don't care, But it's really about understanding, can we be present? And if we're present, we're not wrapped up in the ego, in the self, in the stories. The Buddha also taught that there is no ultimate self, which is another reason why I said, no, I can't talk about the self, because there is no self to talk about. Another one of those contradictions, right? If there is no self, who suffers? All that self is the stories you've been telling. What's your name? Corey. Corey's been telling Corey stories his whole life. Corey is this, Corey's that, Corey's not good enough, Corey did this, Corey's a terrible person, blah, blah, blah. I need crave, desire, fix me, help me, take away my pain. More craving, desire, take away my pain. Corey's a miserable person still. I need more crave, desire, take away my pain. That's a vicious, vicious cycle. Corey is just a human being who has had a tremendous amount of experiences, some traumatic, some not, in your life. Beautiful. Thank you for being here and being alive. Corey's a darn good person. Right? So, the most important thing about understanding your sense of self is that whatever you think your self is, it ain't that. Start there. Instead of trying to jump to like, how do I get rid of myself or how do I get rid of my ego? Start to recognize that the self that you think you are and the ego that you think you are is not correct. Baby steps, yes. So, does that help?
Yes.
All right. So I'll close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, the family and friends who continue to suffer this day. To all those in Ukraine, surrounding areas who've lost lives and their families that suffer, and to the children and adults that lost lives at the shootings in Chicago and Texas, and to their family and friends who suffer. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So before you all head out, Cliff, do you want to do announcements? We just got a couple announcements from our rock star Dharma Bum host, Cliff. Thanks, dude.
Hello, everyone. Tonight's host, Cliff. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who are in need are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice with others. Just about every night, we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, anything else for that matter. A family sangha for parents, kids, toddlers, and teens, which currently meets once a month. And we also offer a half-day silent retreat first Saturday of the month with an RSVP required. Everything we offer here is always free. We have a full schedule on our website and also is posted out in the entryway above the shoe rack. We also have a lending library, and if you see a book that you like to, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're finished. And when you leave, please straighten your cushion, and thank you for being here, and we hope to see you again.
Thanks, Cliff. Thank you all. Have a good night. Don't forget your homework.
Be there.
Be there.